Well, I'll be 102 here in about 3-4 months.
Wow.
You know, I got here in 1963, okay? So you don't recognize the campus, you don't recognize the environment now as compared to what it was then. The Duke was at Mississippi State as president, and he came up here as president. Humphrey had committed to the legislature and the great citizens of Wyoming to build a science center. And he got $9, maybe $10 million from the legislature to build a science center. I might contrast this by telling you the last 2 or 3 buildings that we built were $100 million a piece. And this was supposed to be a whole, anyway, he got that money. And what he had thought was that he could get some more money from Ford Foundation. He knew the people at Ford and at Rockefeller, the private foundations. But it turns out, he didn't know this till he tried, it turns out that these private foundations do not pay or donate any money to public universities for buildings. So the Duke was stuck. And he was kind of in trouble because he had made this commitment and he couldn't get the money. So this is the interesting story. He called up the president of the University of New Mexico and says, I need somebody to build a science center, and incidentally, I've got a position of Dean of Arts and Sciences also available. So Popejoy said, try Meyer up in Las Vegas, New Mexico. Humphrey called me up and said, would you be interested in coming to the University of Wyoming as the Dean of Arts and Sciences? And I said, sure. So I came up here and interviewed with the Duke and so forth. And all the time in the background is this building of the science. I built a science building at Highlands University. I had built one with no state money. I got federal money to build the thing. And that's why Popejoy, I think, suggested I be the guy. So I go back to New Mexico and sit there a little bit, and then to get another call from the Duke, and the Duke says, I want you to come back, bring your wife. We talked for about 5-10 minutes, and the Duke is saying to me, do you think you can get this job done? I'm thinking he's talking about the Dean of Arts and Sciences position. He's not talking about that at all. I finally realized he's talking about building a science center. So that's the number one part. Make a long story short, go back and a couple of days get a call from Humphrey, you're hired. So I came up here. Of course, I had no house or anything, so I'm scouting around for a house. Then comes work on the science center. And the thing, it turned out that I was extremely lucky. In fact, it was the only way the thing could have worked. And the reason I was lucky is because at that time, the U.S. Congress is finally beginning to think, my gosh, look, these Russians have sent this guy into space, Gagarin and so on and so on. We are sitting here and they're way ahead of us. So the Congress appropriated money to the standard organizations, federal organizations, for facilities and for equipment and everything, which they'd never done. So I sat down and wrote proposals to the National Science Foundation, National Institute, Department of Interior. There was no Department of Energy at the time. There was an outfit known as ARPA, which was the atomic, It was supposed to be the civilian part of the nuclear program. Then what happened as the trustees pick an architect, in fact, two architectural firms, one from Rock Springs, one from Cheyenne, to design this building. And the beautiful part about all this was these guys hadn't not the faintest idea about how to design a science building, and which was great. So we sat down and we I had to house physics, chemistry. I'm supposed to house all these departments, and the design involved two science buildings and a classroom building. Arts and sciences had no classroom buildings. We had to beg for space all around the campus. So we designed this thing, and it turned out to really be a pretty good design. And it was interesting because, we had some of the faculty who were doing some research come in and say, well, that size, that you've got for the research module, that's not going to work for me. My standard reply to these guys was, okay, how long are you going to be here? Well, I've got another 15 years. I've got 18 years. I said, this building will be here 50 years. And the next guy that comes in says the lab is not too big, is too big this way. He'll say it's too big that way. And so the lab is going to be as is. It's going to be on the module. And we made it stick. To step back a minute, the thing that was surprising was there was absolutely no support structure at this university. There was no foundation. I had to raise all the money myself. There was no foundation. There was no office for with an architect, a university architect. Everything. I worked directly with the architects myself, the outside architect. So there was absolutely no infrastructure at the university, and this also included in the academic side as well. So when I arrived, sitting on the dean's desk was a Marchand adding machine. That was it. So as I've said many times, there was no infrastructure. So the bad news, I'd do everything myself. The good news was nobody could tell me what to do and what not to do. Really. I mean, locating the buildings and all this and that, nobody even thought of it. This project was the largest construction in at that time in the history of the state of Wyoming. I got here in '63 and started to work on this thing. And to give you an idea, by 1969, in 6 years, the job was done. And today, in 6 years, if you think of a building you want to build, in 6 years, if you get started, you're lucky. But again, the lack of infrastructure, people and guys over in Cheyenne, legislators, so nobody knew a damn thing about any of this sort of stuff. So we just did it. The campus, by the way, there was a street from the drive around Breakfast to 9th Street. There was a road, a city street, and I closed it. And there was yelling and screaming, so on, you can't get into the campus from the west side, so you have to go around to get into the campus. But we could do that stuff. There's nobody else could. I mean, they could complain, but they couldn't do anything about it. So that enabled me to get the job done. The board of trustees, bless them, had no concept of what was involved. And, the idea was that we were going to just do more of what we were doing, but my idea was we've got to do more of something we're not doing. And I wanted to have doctoral programs in all the sciences, and how we ever convinced NSF, I don't know, or these other agencies, because we really had a minimum going in the way of graduate programs. So in the basement of the physical sciences building, I built two things. One, a big machine shop that could do anything. I mean, we had milling machines and drills and everything. And I had a glass shop, and I had an electronics shop, and major instruments. And one of the interesting parts of this whole thing was to talk to the board and say, I've got to get an infrared spectrometer. And the guys say, what's that? And I said, well, I guess I can't tell you other than that. That's an instrument that operates in the infrared part of the spectrum, and it's essential for analysis of certain things. And so, well, that sounds good. What does it cost? I don't know, probably $50 to $100,000, which was cheap. Today you couldn't buy it for that. What? My God, you don't mean to tell me, yes, that's what we're going to get. And we're going to mass spectrometer and this and that, And these guys, it was a real picnic because the board, really did not understand what the heck we were doing. But God bless them, they accepted it. And so we got the thing done that way. And in 1969, we moved people in.